Hello. Welcome to the not-so-grand reopening of In Taberna, where we can once again converse. We still recommend AntennaPod and GPodder and copy-pasting the RSS feed for your convenience, and we can still be reached at intabernacast@protonmail.com. INTABERNACAST @protonmail.com. We're already starting a little late, but if we can't be punctual, we can at least be consistent. Thanks again for being in Taberna, and I hope you guys enjoy. This is episode 4, the return of In Taberna. It has been a year, and I'm sorry, but with me today, and hopefully every day following this, as In Taberna is hoping to become a more regular podcast rather than 3 episodes a year. With me today is Classical Theist. How you doing, man? What's up? We're back.
Hey. I'm supposed to be the one that has an irregular upload schedule.
I haven't even been paying attention. Like, what have you been? Did you have a schedule? Did you make promises that you've broken?
A couple times. But that's all in the past. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's the summer. The summer is starting. I guess let me explain. We are returning, and the first thing I wanted to do was retractions about all of this COVID stuff, because it's been a year, right? Basically.
Yeah. I feel like part of the reason why we haven't uploaded in a long time is shame.
Yeah, it's hard to eat crow, but I mean the Christian life is part of the Christian life is humility. So that episode in the Plague Tide, which was episode 1, which followed episode 0, was it? I dropped it onto the internet on April 15th, so it's been a little bit more than a year. The last episode was May 4th. Oh gosh. But we just wanted to address a couple things, and the most obvious being that very clearly this covdinal situation was not what we thought it would be.
Now, in our defense, we made sure that we had a caveat that if all of this turns out to be a hoax, that we would retract.
Yeah, and I mean this is in the Saint Augustine made retractions before he died. Hopefully that's not a sign of anything, but retractions doesn't mean that you're cringe or that you're cucking out or anything. It just means that you have the self-awareness to know. But obviously we thought a year ago, or we hoped almost, that this would be the plague, that this would be a huge disaster. But I mean, anyone who's listening to this is probably center right, and so they're probably aware of all of the dubious stuff about the COVID vaccine and the just the horrible social, psychological, economic, and spiritual harm that these lockdowns have done.
Yes.
And I feel that I owe an apology to the boomers. I feel like we were a little harsh on the boomers last year because they were doing like summits and stuff about like the banning of the banning of the suspension rather of mass by the bishops of the Catholic Church in America and throughout the world. Um, but at this point, it's pretty clear that they're just, in bed with the temporal power,
Yeah.
and that this is all, some type of psyop to.
Now, there were aspects of the pandemic as it was happening, as it was beginning to unfold, that we had thought may have showed signs of maybe breaking the log jam, as it were, of um, post-war modern society, I guess. One indicator was that that was coming up in the news was that, well, this was forcing mothers to like stay home with their children more often, and things like that. But I guess in hindsight, in actuality, it really far from from opening opportunities like that. It sort of just reinforced the the stranglehold that the that modern liberal institutions have um, on society.
Right, like the part of our, younger people, I'm getting to the age where I can't really like say that like I'm a younger person, but I've got a couple years left. I think once you hit like 33, that's when you can be like, yeah, I'm like a grown up now. I'm not cool anymore, but I've got a little time. But younger people in particular, and I mean, I can still talk about the generational differences, but like
Yeah.
millennials and zoomers that are center right, um, and even people that are on the left, basically anyone who isn't like apolitical or like a centrist, which is very few people because we're very, very ideological generations because of the internet. But everyone was kind of either very afraid, or it's like, okay, people definitely center right, at least we're like, okay, like a bunch of people are gonna die, and that's gonna present like opportunity for like society to get back for a more healthy level, and um we're going to, moms are gonna stay home, and then like people are gonna have to like go to like local markets again, eventually, and
Yeah, and we also like Trump was president too, so we thought like maybe he would take more autocratic control over things that might shift um, the the ordinary way by which conservative governance is viewed. That didn't really happen at all, you know.
no, Trump just kind of, I mean, I might end up regret saying this, but Trump kind of spent the last year of his term of his presidency just kind of twiddling his thumbs. It felt like to
I think
me.
that's the best way to put it. I don't see him as like a traitor or anything like that, but I think twiddling his thumbs is probably the best way to put it. It was just more, just ineffective.
Yeah, I mean obviously, I mean, we'll see what happens in 2024. I mean, sure, we can talk more about that later, but the main thing is I'm sure that this kind of millennial Gen Z hope for like disaster, I haven't seen many examples of boomers interacting with it, but I'm sure that it would kind of disturb them, where it's like, you want people to die? Like, that's so, and it's like, no, like, I don't, not necessarily you personally, but the opportunities that COVID presented could have made society better, but it didn't, and that's because we all know it's like, you know, this thing, the lockdown measures at the very least. I'm not sure if I'm going to put this episode on YouTube, but I can edit around it for YouTube. But the lockdown measures, certainly, it's just all about social control and all this stuff that people have already talked to death about.
Yeah.
But we have to acknowledge that for the sake of posterity, because
Yeah.
you know
And I mean, there are a lot of like common good conservative types who were talking about how, well, isn't this great because it'll get people away from um, liberal paradigms like individualism, and it'll get people thinking about like the common good, and that higher order goods have to be prioritized before personal liberty. And then you think, okay, in the abstract, that might be a good thing, but who who's going to be directing the common good? It's going to be, the bureaucracies. It's going to be uh, just liberal institutions that have absolutely no regard for what any common good conservative, quote unquote, would recognize as the common good. Really, so it really just.
Are you referring to the pseudo-integralists?
Yeah, well, yeah, certainly,
Okay. So like, we had a, oh gosh, this is revealing thing. We talk outside of Twitter, you and I. That's, oh
yeah.
my god, secret news. But we were talking the other day about just stuff and doing prep for the show, and I I've come to the conclusion that I hate theologians as much as any other academic. You know, I mean, maybe I just suffer from like outsider syndrome, and I'm just like Raskolnikov, and at any moment I'm going to just like hack my local convenience store owner to death with an axe or something. But I I just feel like these people, like these political theologians, it's like either you are talking about this stuff in bad faith about the common good and like, oh, the lockdown's gonna have people thinking more, integrally and about community and about like what's good for
They're
his.
still doing it, like with the vaccines, for example.
Oh
This
gosh,
this priest on Twitter, who is very much of that line of thinking,
who doesn't have to be
was
named.
right. But what he was saying, things like um, the arguments that people like you and I are leveling against the vaccines, um, that they're just repackaged formulations of pro-choice arguments about personal bodily autonomy, and that we all have to understand that autonomy has to be subordinated to the common good, and this and that and the other thing. It's like these are just abstractions that have their proper place, but totally disconnected from just concrete reality. I think that maybe gets to what you're trying to say about hating theologians.
Yeah, because it's like you think that this stuff. That's precisely what I'm saying. You can anticipate me because we talked about it yesterday. Is that it's like you okay like common good man. It's like the lamest frickin' superhero ever. Common good man. Um, you think like, oh, common good man here to make you to take the vaccine. Common good man here to tell you to let in critical mass of Latino immigration. You're going to common good man says you're going to hell if you don't. Um, but common good man may say all this stuff, but it's like, do you think that politics exists? Like, if politics is politics, I thought the point of like studying politics was to understand politics, which means that people are political actors, which means that different political actors have different interests. And it's like, oh yeah, the neoliberal security state, which provides public funding for Planned Parenthood and is putting the rainbow LGBT flag on our embassies around the world. Oh yeah, they have your best interest at heart. And so it's like, shouldn't you be like talking about the things that actually matter, and like trying to like organize things to stop the continual degradation of our culture, the brainwashing of children in government schools. That's a new like center right dog whistle that I learned that I actually really like, is calling public schools government schools. Isn't that
Yeah,
fun?
right. Yeah, I mean it's a good way to phrase it. Well, I mean they turn things like the common good and even integralism
Microphone
into
muted.
uh, like an ideology,
Microphone activated.
and political Catholicism has never been ideological. It's always been pre-ideological in a sense.
Yeah, I mean the thing of it is, even people like Demetra and Donoso Cortez and, you know, all those guys who I really like, and whenever these pseudo-integralists invoke them to justify their shitbird takes, it's kind of a case of stolen valor. But the original or reactionaries, they weren't like arguing for a ideology that they came up with whole cloth. They were arguing for basically an arrangement that had been considered normal in one way, shape, or form for hundreds of years. That's not to say that political philosophy didn't exist. It did. But it wasn't like ideological in the way that, you know, something like Marxism or fascism or whatever was. And so for them to do this and to turn, their freaking basic take on the Summa and turn it into like a campaign button that you can wear, it's really stupid and it's not good. But
and all it really does is give like it's taking
Microphone
the
muted.
Imperialism of
Microphone
neoliberal
activated.
institutions and slapping an imprimatur on them, which is just totally toxic, I think.
A certain Catholic Twitter person said, you know, I really like the aesthetic of the Biden administration.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
Because he frickin' gave the oath of office on an old Douay Rheims Bible, and it's just like, are you people this shallow? And
yes, they are.
The answer is yes, but it's like, oh well, you know, this is a completely meaningless gesture, and all of these gestures are just so utterly meaningless, and to think. And it's like, well, we need to, like, prepare. It's like, I'm for, like, illiberal governance, and I'm for, you know, a strong authority and, you know, the enforcement of moral norms and order and all of these other, like, you know, high right-wing memes or whatever, but
they're not detached from content.
No, in any way, or context. And the content and the context is that Joe Biden wants your kids to be gay.
Yeah.
And if he can hack them to bits in the womb and convince, you know, your spouse to do that first, that's preferable. But if they manage to survive the abortion, then definitely they need to be gay, and probably trans. Actually, that'd be really a lot better. And, you know, someone that I feel like I owe an apology to because I was, like, really annoyed, and poor guy, he's been deplatformed from everything. He's been unpersoned, is Dr. EMJ. Because you remember a year ago he was talking about ahistorical Thomism. And about, you know, and which is what we're talking about, which is just Thomism without context. Without any political acumen, and, you know, we were kind of, at the time, we were
which
like...
Which is not Thomas, by the way.
Well, no, which is not St. Thomas at all. Thomas was a very, very practical person who believed in racial difference and understood that people from different climates acted differently.
That's this. You can check his recognition of that in the Summa on Beneficence, by the way.
Give me a second. I am going to have to cut this out because I accidentally did something that was stupid. Okay.
Okay, no problem. I got it marked.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, but EMJ was talking about this stuff, and it's, you know, I want to acknowledge that, you know, he was right. I mean, there's one of these things where it's like, was he right because he's just kind of in a conspiratorial, suspicious of the neoliberal security state at all times mode? Which, me just saying that sentence, I realize that's actually a very rational posture to be in consistently. So, like, is he right because it's like, well, that's just, he's gonna, you know, in the game of political whack-a-mole, he's always gonna hit that hole, always, constantly. And if you just hit the same one, you're guaranteed to get it right several times. But the point is that he was right, we were wrong. And Taka we'll shift a little bit back. And that's because that's why the collapsitarian graph that was popular a while ago. The squiggly lines showing all the bad stuff happening in society. That that's not merely like a foreboding warning for people that have grown up under the internet. It was almost a sign of hope, because it's like you're saying that life can be better. You're saying that eventually all this bullshit's just gonna end, and that I will have like an opportunity to be a human being. And so that's what COVID kind of represented, but obviously it just turned out to be the strengthening of neoliberal institutions. I was recently at a appointment today, actually, with my wife, and we were not the establishment was run by someone who's very obviously signals, like, how you can just talk to someone, you can tell if they were like a Trump supporter in 16. He's one of those guys, and the sign said no mask required, and like in like the smallest font possible but still visible on the side, it said if vaccinated. But
so I think like the print was deliberately as small as it could be, so that would just not be.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure anyway. But so we were in there, and we were in the waiting room, and I was waiting for my wife to do her appointment, and no one there was wearing masks, and I was just like, damn it, this feels weird, and I hate that. And, which is like, that's how much that they've conditioned us to feel that way over the past 2 years.
I mean, it's even affected my subconscious, where, because for a long time, I've, worked in an environment where I had to wear a mask. And even for some reason, subconsciously, when I walk in one of these stores without one, it feels like I'm doing something wrong, but I've been formally anti-mask for a long time now. But it is the conditioning, and it does work.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the old leftist meme. I don't know where it originates from, but you are not immune to propaganda.
Right. Yeah.
I recently. Do you like Wes Anderson's movies? We haven't really talked about this before, but
Not really. Not really into it.
Oh, okay. So I was watching The Grand Budapest Hotel a couple weeks ago. I love his movies because
I did see that movie.
And it's like, Wes Anderson to me is such an artist, and he's been described to me as like hoppy beer. Like, you either really like him or you just don't. But in the Grand Budapest Hotel, a plot point involves a Middle Eastern refugee is one of the main characters, and T.A. Jackson talks about this. I feel like I mention T.A. Jackson's every time we record. Poor guy, I gotta get him on the show. But I was watching this movie and I was thinking, if I was like 20% less aware of the reality of the effects of mass immigration and all this stuff, this would have me.
I mean, it would probably have me too, because I live in an area where I'm not really much affected by it.
And so it's like, if you are given that message enough, repeatedly, and in an effective manner that speaks to you, you will start to like soften up on certain things. This is how they legalize gay marriage.
Yeah, this is why I just don't watch TV, and I instruct like everyone I know not to watch like the vast majority of television shows that are out there, even though they profess conservative ideas. It will start to impact you in ways you don't recognize, and it'll be very cumulative. It'll be very gradual.
Well, I mean, that's always been a watchword of the tradition, is that you have to form your conscience.
Yeah.
That you're not, that human.
The Catholic Church has been very clear on that. With what you're exposed to, doesn't matter how firm you are in the faith. The more you're exposed to evil, the more it'll start to seep into you.
Yeah, period. And that's just true. But we acknowledge the truth about the covdinal situation. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. And going forward, we can just be aware of that. And so we've
even deleted my video on it. I made a video about
you wuss.
back in the day.
You wuss. I'm keeping this up. I'm even going to upload it to YouTube. I'm just going to have the notes being like, yeah, we were very wrong, but I'm uploading this to posterity. I understand, though. I think that's still valid to take it down.
Yeah, no.
It's like I owe Janet Smith, who was that theologian lady. She was on Pints with Aquinas debating with, who's the Dominican priest? What's that guy's name? Father Pine.
Father Pine, yeah.
She was the one who was debating about lying, to like save someone's life or whatever. I didn't watch that, but she was the one that organized all of the, open up for Easter stuff last year, and sorry if I, was mean about it. You were right. I was wrong. Not that she'll ever listen to this, but she's a sweet lady, and I do feel bad about thinking ill. And so another thing, I guess, on the topic of return is one reason I decided to come back out of my Fulgen stupor. Do you know that word Fulgen?
I do not.
I might be saying it wrong. It might be Fulgim, but I think it's Fulgen. But it's one of Gene Wolfe's favorite words. It's a color darker than black. That's what that means, Fulgen. It's kind of a fun one to have. But I feel like that. I feel like that COVID has taken us into like a weird time warp where like time has progressed, but we're also back before Trump was elected. And
yeah,
part of that is that I feel like over the past like couple years, what's happened was like a cardinal, a retired cardinal archbishop who was the cardinal archbishop of one of the most powerful episcopal seats in the world, was credibly accused and found guilty of sex abuse. And I'm, of course, talking about, Uncle Teddy McCarrick. Or as he was known in, like, the gay scene, they called him Teddy Bear McCarrick. And that happened. That was a big deal. Vigano dropped his letters. That was a big deal. There were a couple other things that I know that I'm even, like, forgetting in, like, church and Vatican issues.
Like the Amazon Synod.
Oh, yeah, Pachamama. All
Yeah.
that. Taylor Marshall and Timothy Gordon freaking interviewed McCarrick's accuser. James Grind, which was really, like, the beginning of, like, they were gaining traction, but that was just, like, the boom, meteoric rise of, like, Marshall and Gordon's brands. And I mean, everyone knows that they broke up and blah, blah, blah. Talk about that later. But a lot of stuff happened. Like I was saying to you yesterday, Matt Fradd had Michael Voris on his show a couple years ago to talk about how Voris is essentially right about all this reporting about,
Yeah, it did sort of bring about I guess you could maybe call it a
Microphone muted.
renaissance. Maybe that's not really the right
Microphone
word,
activated.
but certainly a coming together of all sorts of different Catholic voices on different, sides of the traditionalism spectrum, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
All centered around sort of this heightened Francis skepticism that emerged out of the sex abuse revelations with McCarrick in conjunction with the Amazonian Synod. Two monumental scandals within different categories of church life.
Yeah, totally. But now it's 2021 And I feel like that we've reached a new status quo. I feel like that we've gone back to the status quo that's the same, that different, a little bit circa 2014. Like basically right after Amoris Laetitia came out, and everyone had their questions about, that footnote and, the orthodoxy of it and so on and so forth. The topic that we're not going to discuss in detail today, but we can discuss in detail another time. But what I'm talking about in that moment a couple years ago with that time is that everyone was like shocked, but you had the Catholic Answers kind of crew just dreaming like, oh no, this is really what Francis means. This is just who am I to judge again.
Here's a Thomistic spin.
Right, and so like we've reached a new version of that, and I've been very Fulgen, been very blue, and despite even just like positive words, I just haven't wanted to do this because of various personal reasons. And, I have a melancholic temperament by nature, borderline misanthropic even. But just seeing just this, this stagnation and just the regression back to this, I was just like, okay, guys, what's going on here? Like, we learned new things. We learned that the crazy wacko trads were right about the corruption in the church being this bad at the highest levels, and we're just returning to the status quo again. And we haven't achieved a copacetic frame.
Right.
Frame. Yeah, go ahead.
We don't really have a proper hermeneutic, I think, through which we can analyze and understand these events that are happening in the church. I thought that we might have been coming toward a helpful hermeneutic in that regard as of about like a year ago, but it seems even that has slid back into, I think, just pure Francis apologetics. Because on the one hand, you and I have talked about this very often. We don't want to indulge in Francis hysteria. I think Francis hysteria is really a distraction. It's also not realistic about who Pope Francis is. Maybe we can get into that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
What I thought was happening as a reaction to that Francis hysteria was a proper hermeneutic that recognizes the realism of the corruption that's happening, while also not while also avoiding the entire spiritual life being contingent on what Pope Francis is doing,
right,
Monday through Friday.
There's certain people where you don't, not naming names, blah blah blah, but the
that
thing
may happen in other episodes.
The things that people that have large platforms, and I don't have a problem saying Taylor Marshall's name because everyone knows how I feel about Marshall, is that, he's kind of, I feel like he's really, and this doesn't, you're not a bad person for watching his content or reading him. I think my words to those people that really like Marshall that are listening to this is I'm going to say there's better stuff out there, and that Marshall in a way is really trying to like figure this out live. But the problem, and this is another thing you and I have talked about, privately and possibly a little bit on the air, is that Catholics that are center right from the spectrum of, conservative to traditionalists, and especially all of these people that like supported Trump, are desperate for leadership because our bishops are so bad. They are so bad. They are, there's a essay that I refer to often about that Christopher Dawson, the Catholic historian, where he talks about how, the spirit of the Homeric warrior, which all human culture was based on until recently, a couple centuries, that the spirit of the Homeric warrior is superior to that of the stockbroker or the accountant. And most certainly our leaders are emblematic of the spirit of the insurance agent or or the stockbroker, not even the stockbroker, but the spirit of the H&R Block accountant, a strip mall accountant. That's about as much faith as a lot of spirit bishops inspire, and that's not like saying.
Yeah, I mean, they're just administrators. They're your bureaucratic administrators. That's sort of just the mentality that so many of them have taken up, and it's been spiritually draining to so many people.
Right.
And I just think that the solution to that cannot just be a new purely theological hermeneutic through which we can come to realize that maybe everything that's happening is fulfilling some sort of esoteric Bergoglian theology. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Jorge Bergoglio. Francis is a Catholic, but if you read even Austin Ivory's biography, the best lens to view Francis through is as a political actor. I think I said this to you a while ago, which is that Pope. If you want to know what Pope Francis's endgame is he wants his face to be on the Trick or Treat for UNICEF box.
Yes.
Okay. And for those of you that are a little young or don't remember, Trick or Treat for UNICEF was like the United Nations Children's Fund, where you got a little box from your public school, from your government school, and you went trick-or-treating, and you were just like, trick or treat for UNICEF in front, and they were like, oh, how sweet, here's a quarter, and they put a quarter in your box, and you mailed that to the United Nations for them to fund giving condoms to small African children. And and taking pictures with George Clooney. Though that is Francis's number one thing. That is his barometer for success. He quite enjoys being the leader of the world's largest NGO, which is one way you could view the Catholic Church, and that's the way that a lot of cynical political actors view it.
That's the way America Magazine views it.
Yeah, and to a large extent, America Magazine, they chronicle the Jesuits, who did a podcast project about what it's like to be a Catholic with AIDS and gay. That kind of gives you an idea of their tenor. Is when you think of America Magazine, you just think of AIDS.
Yes.
Just think of AIDS. That's what you need to think of. Just think of the long, slow process of dying of AIDS. That's what the Jesuits are going through, analogously, of course,
and sometimes literally.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I mean, I think that this sort of more realistic view of Pope Francis, recognizing the fact that he's not really a theological actor, he really is a political actor. Pope Benedict XVI, and I have some criticisms of his theology. I think that's reasonable and certainly allowed. But he was a theological actor. Pope Francis is not really a theological actor. He's a political actor. I think recognizing that saves you the headache of the hysteria. Because if you just recognize him for who he is, you don't necessarily need to be convinced that he's operating under some sort of esoteric, satanic plot to infiltrate the Catholic Church and destroy it from within. We don't necessarily have to be committed to that idea.
Nor is he consciously trying to fulfill the mission of Vatican II, whatever the hell that means.
Right.
I've been reading some stuff about Francis. I will continue to read stuff about Francis. And here's the thing, is that you and I can say. We read, and that's because that's one of the things we talk about. That's one of the cornerstones of like our social life with each other, is we read the dreck that the Vatican publishes from his pen.
Yes.
And to me, it's just UN NGO bafflegab.
With theological fairy dust sprinkled over it, that's functionally what it is. Okay, that is functionally its ultimate purpose, at least for, I think, not in everything he does. I think there's a part of him that does want to be a pastor, the flock. I think that's true.
Well, I mean that's because he enjoys his will dominating others, but that's a biographer psychological point, and I can already hear the peanut gallery, and it's like, yeah, whatever. Go read Austin Ivory's biography. I'm not telling you to read The Dictator Pope. Go read Ivory's biography and read between the lines.
Right, but in terms of like what he ultimately wants to do with the Catholic Church, I think those aims are thoroughly and functionally political, along the lines that you have articulated quite well.
Yeah, and the thing of it is I'm not going to. Here's the thing. I kind of find Papa Pancho to be endearing because he makes no one but himself happy. Like, do you want to talk about living your best life, man? Like,
yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes he's not even, but, an example of this is like the UN Health Summit that he did, where he had Chelsea Clinton and Dr. Fauci over.
Right, yeah, the one that was organized, I think, by the cardinal who's in the Pontifical Council for Culture or something like that.
Yeah,
it's actually kind of interesting figure. I mean, like, he's not. I mean, this guy's just. I wouldn't necessarily identify him as just like a thoroughgoing evil liberal. I think he's just kind of goofy, frankly. Like, really into cultural iconography and really wanting to make the church relevant to the wider culture, things like that. I think he's just more of a goofy guy, frankly.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. The name is escaping me now, but we'll talk about him probably another day, because as the way things go, like with Cardinal Becciu is like a person that you talk about over and over again. He implicated with the Vatican financial, but the culture minister of the Vatican or whatever, he's a similar figure where he'll cyclically come up in news stories because he's one of the main players in the play that is the story of shadows and cocaine orgies that is the Vatican. And look, the thing, I'm being kind of blasé about this because, this is probably, this is the return episode, and so this is probably a good time to kind of give a little biographical note. I might even do just like a whole show on like our journeys of faith. But I was like reading Malachi Martin when I was 13. I was aware of like NATO troops and like FEMA camps and all that stuff basically from the time I was 8. We talked about this, you and I, a little bit yesterday. And so, I apologize to anyone who might be scandalized by this. My intention is not to like have one over on you, but the fact is you just got to be realistic about this stuff. And for me, I've known about this stuff forever. There was never no point where like I learned about the truth. No, I've always known that, there's been mafia connections and vague spooky stuff and tons of gay clubs in, the Vatican, and I'm still a Catholic. And what's happening is that McCarrick brought the truth of all of that to a level of public consciousness that had not existed before. But it's like we've backslid into the Francisplaining again,
Yeah.
And part of that's a coping mechanism, and I mean, there's a bunch of issues about why, Catholics have been way too hyper focused on the papacy, probably for like 150 years. I'm very fond of the ultramontanists. Like, I take their side over the liberals when it comes to just like the nature of the church and ecclesiology in the 19th and the early 20th century. But it's very clear that like a lot of these theological manuals, like your Sevillaries and the Studia Theologia Summa, which the STS, these manuals were these also. I'm not a Marxist. I'm not a card-carrying Marxist. Not every idea is like a product of material circumstances, but these manuals were products of their time and circumstance.
Yes.
And that no one would have dreamed, even in the 50s when the STS was written, that there would have been a pope like Paul VI or Francis.
And that's the problem, because I think, not saying that the substance of those manuals, the Sacra Theologiae Summa manuals, not saying that they're necessarily wrong, not saying that their substance is theologically incorrect per se. I think it is very important to have a robust understanding of the authentic magisterium of the Catholic Church and recognize it as living, and that the Second Vatican Council didn't somehow delegitimize the authentic magisterium of the Church. No. Nevertheless, I think we have to recognize the fact that when they were written, perhaps a limitation of their historical circumstance is reflected in the fact that they don't even acknowledge the possibility.
Yeah, like giving some context here, and we'll probably do an entire show on this with some of our historian friends. Pius XII was considered a little bit more liberal, if you want, than his predecessors, right? But OSS documents, documents from the proto-CIA, which you can Freedom of Information Act and read, reveal that, allegedly, according to like German intelligence from the Second World War, according to the Nazi intelligence, that Pius XII basically had a plan to create a reactionary Catholic European bloc to counteract the American sphere of influence and the Soviet sphere of influence. Like, there was plans to like get Franco Salazar and the gang and de Gaulle and convince him to like re-Catholicize France and take the remnants of Mussolini's political infrastructure and basically paint it with papal gold and white and have the Pope be the symbolic head of a European Catholic continent that would essentially be an integralist political bloc that would counteract American capitalist materialism and Soviet atheism. Pius XII had that plan, okay? This sounds like something from like Tradcath Conquistador 1488 Twitter accounts, like fan fiction.
Yeah.
Okay? But this is real. And I'm saying this is the context of where the papacy and the Vatican as a geopolitical actor was when these manuals were written.
And under those conditions, of course it made sense to emphasize obedience, to emphasize religious submission of intellect and will to magisterial documents. That emphasis made sense because the leadership was, to varying degrees, and we can mention we could talk about like the limitations of even the 19th century and early 20th century popes. I think that's a legitimate discussion to have. Nevertheless, it was just manifest in their writings and their intentions and geopolitical motives, like what you just mentioned. The interest was to Catholicize the world, to evangelize the world in the proper sense, right? And out of that environment, a manualism that emphasizes magisterial obedience over and against dissent is very needed. But I think what we need going forward is not so much a repudiation of what's in those manuals, but a carving out a uh, theological mechanism by which we can recognize when assent is due and when it can be withheld, more than just general abstractions like you find in Donum Veritatis.
Yeah, because like with the current with papal positivism of various even if one acknowledges that Francis is like a bad actor, there's a certain type of Francisplaining and overly magisterial hyper magisterial positivism, magisterial
Yes.
hyper positivism. We'll coin that now, magisterial hyper positivism, that even if it's being used as a coping mechanism, it's not, his goal is not to bind you with these things. These are just NGO documents, basically.
And by the way, some of the people who say this stuff have not actually read much of the current magisterial corpus. I will point that out.
Yeah, and the thing of it is it's like, if you're like a sensitive guy and you've been through the ringer with the Francis papacy. I mean, I make fun of him online, and I'm not the nicest to him, but like someone that you can tell is having like a really hard time is like Steve Skojec, and I say this earnestly, even as I've like had clashes with him. I mean, I think we're both blocked by him.
Yeah, we are.
But like, pray for him, for him, because he's having a hard. And it's like, if you are looking at this stuff and you are like a normie, or like, I'm gonna use the word normie. Because we don't live in a normal society. Normal means normative, means healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just like living in normie land, and your life has been just ingesting all of the shit that happens in the Vatican, you're gonna have a hard time. And so you should pray for Steve Skojec. But talking about people that are sensitive, it's like, I understand you don't want to read through this stuff, but like, this is the sausage that they're making.
Yeah, look, if you're emphasizing magisterial obedience, you had better be aware of what you're telling people to assent to.
Yeah,
I recognize the theological validity of the authentic magisterium of the Church, but if you're going to be articulating these theological truths and nuancing them and qualifying them to the satisfaction of your audience or your viewers or your listeners, I think you should make it a point to read through carefully what it is the current magisterium is saying about all of these things, so that you recognize why people are having a problem with them in the first place.
Yeah, CT and I are so cool and up on like Francis lore that like we'll talk about what our favorite Francis documents are, like Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Like, my is it Fratelli Tutti that like he almost gives you like the framework to he unwittingly gives you the framework to defend white nationalism, right?
Well, it's very interesting because it's like in one paragraph where he's on the one hand he phrases like the fact that he does not want to impose a a kind of undifferentiated unity that would uh, I guess eradicate the like integrity of cultural differences and the differences between peoples. And if you just take that statement, I mean, that's something like that, like Red Ice TV.
It's like, whoa, okay, Richard Spencer.
Right.
Like cool it down a notch here. You support Palestine and you're talking about cultural integrity. Let's calm down here. Okay, Pope Adolf.
And then, he circles back and emphasizes, the rights of the mass movements of people, and that you can have some sort of a cultural synthesis within one homeland from between natives and migrants and things like that. And it was obviously drafted by like a committee of of
Yeah,
people that are trying to please multiple actors, but
it's very
like
clear.
you have to read this stuff if you're going to be talking about the magisterium and magisterial assent. You do have to read all this stuff.
I like to call those the ethno-nationalist passages.
Yeah,
and like it's very clear that like when they drafted this, they were like thinking about like Amazonian tribesmen like throwing rocks into like logging equipment and stuff like that. And then they're like, "Oh shit, Giuseppe, you just justified American white nationalism. What are you doing? Oh no, damn it, not again. I'm sorry, my father, my uncle, he was friends with Mussolini."
I mean, that's very interesting because if I think a phrase like that could only have been allowed to be drafted in like in outside of the Anglosphere.
Yeah, because we're too hypersensitive to that. That's something that a lot of good Vaticanistas will always talk about, is that the Vatican is thoroughly an Italian institution. And in a weird way, Francis is kind of a return to tradition, because it's like, oh, the first first Argentinian pope. His dad was like a middle class immigrant to Argentina. Mm-hmm. So like there's a lot of Italianness to Francis, a lot. He had a freaking spy in the Vatican when he was Bishop of Buenos Aires. I forget his name, but I'll have to pick up some articles and read. But he had a spy in the Congregation of Bishops, and so like he's been playing the game of shadows in the Vatican for a very long time, at least since 2001. But the Vatican is a very insular institution. It's a very Italian institution, and it runs on Italian time and norms, which, if you're not familiar with those, it's not going to make sense to you. And to ameliorate that, I would just recommend reading the Vaticanistas and reading there's a series of novels that are escaping me that I'll put in the show notes, where it's about a town that has a fascist parish priest and a communist mayor, but they're like the two organizing factors of the society. It's very, very funny. And it kind of, and these books give you gives you an insight into the way that Italians in the old country do this. It's called The Little World of Don Camillo. That's what they're called, The Little World of Don Camillo, or Dom Camillo, which is these series of novels about this priest. And there's The Little World of Don Camillo is the movie, but they were some of my granddad's favorite books because they're just very funny. But if you don't understand the time that the Vatican works on and the cultural beats, a lot of this isn't going to make sense to you. But like you were saying, these ethno-nationalist passages could only have been written by an Italian, because they're not hypersensitive about this stuff like in the Anglosphere. But then someone, probably from South America, was like, "Oh no, this could justify the fascism," and they strike to it. But they're written by a committee. A lot of encyclicals and a lot of papal documents are, and if you're not aware of that, then you're going to be pulling your hair out of your head.
Right. Especially when encyclicals are just like thoroughly politically motivated, and they're written by people who, like we were talking about earlier, are functionally bureaucrats and not really theological actors.
That's something that Henry Sire, and I will recommend The Dictator Pope here, because he has a good passage about how middle of the 20th century, the Curia, meaning the papal court, the Vatican's political functioning body, changed and became more bureaucratic, whereas prior to that, basically after the fall of the Papal States, it was very much so run in the way that a old monarchical court was run. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like, in a way, popes since really since Pius XII have been seeing themselves more and more as like the prime minister of the church, less so as a papal monarch.
Hmm.
Which is why it's kind of funny to see these. I say the pseudo integralists kind of derisively, because if you're not aware of the perils of demographic change and mass immigration and all that stuff, then what you're saying is basically meaningless, because you don't have any awareness or care about the actual shifts in the cultures of,
Yeah.
Catholic lands and
I mean,
Catholic.
at that point, you're just an ivory tower academic, and your opinion is worthless.
Yeah, I mean, worth reading to make fun of you. But the it's funny when you read the pseudo integralists, the post liberals, as I've heard some people call them, do these like overtures about papal authority and stuff, and it's like the Rome has, the papacy, the popes have been trying to divest themselves of the auspices of monarchical authority for like over 70 years now, almost a century. And so it's like, okay, bro, I don't know what you're talking about. But, I mean, that also comes with some paradox, which is that, Francis has released more motu proprios, which is basically like a papal executive order.
Yes.
Can be overturned by another pope or even by him. He's issued more motu proprios than JP2.
He has governed very aggressively.
Yeah, there's something interesting about that too, where there's kind of an analog in the neoliberal.
Again, when you're a political actor, it makes sense. That's when you want to function as a political mover and shaker, motu proprios are the way to do it.
Yeah, just full out release like 20 of these every year, 20, basically decrees by fiat, and then make overtures about conciliarity and about like, I think I made this joke, like these that, because like that's the real point of him making these cardinals in the third world, is that it's because they don't know anything, and so they owe him favors. It makes him look good, and they're no political threat to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I feel like these cardinals from, like, Brunei and, like, Papua New Guinea, like, I just want to, like, give them a t-shirt that just says, "I'm happy to be here." Because that's basically it. Oh, gosh, the next conclave is going to be chaos. Oh, Lord in heaven, that's going to be such a disaster to watch. So checking the show notes, we're at about an hour now. We'll keep going for a little bit, but I see that you have George Floyd Mass in the notes for us to cover.
Yeah, well, I just thought of sort of bringing that up as a reflection of the thoroughly political nature of Vatican bureaucracy, of ecclesiastical bureaucracy today. I mean, there is, I believe, I forget where now, but there is going to be a memorial mass for George Floyd. And
this doesn't have the character of a petitionary, pray for this man's soul type of thing.
It's like
it's a political,
it's as close as they can get to like a feast day without calling it a feast day.
And the thing of it is they do this, they've done this for decades too, versions of this, and they call it the Martin Luther King Mass.
Yeah.
They do it, and and before people were like, this is across the, I need to change religions to something more base. No, idiot, sit down. You're gonna hurt yourself. Calm down. The you've got Orthodox metropolitans and Protestant ministers and all across the board marching for Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is that if you want to be part of a based sect in a religion, it's not a matter of finding a based religion. It's a matter of finding a based sect within a religion. You have to find it. And, you can just as easily do that here as you can anywhere else. I'm not saying one way or the other. You should probably stay Catholic, though. And the point is that this kind of very obvious critical race theory, political signaling, is across the board. It's endemic in society. Did you hear? Did I tell you about Georgetown and the
No,
slaves?
I don't think so.
Yeah, they so apparently the Jesuits in Georgetown, Catholic University in D.C. If you live under a rock, they did they sold slaves in the 1830s. Like it wasn't their industry, but they sold some slaves, as you did in the day. Which do I really have to condemn the evils of chattel slavery?
No, it's understood.
I don't think I need to do that. But the Jesuits basically in Georgetown has done a genealogy project where they're thinking about doing reparations to the descendants of these black Catholic slaves, and that's just kind of okay, that's gonna open the door for some really asinine garbage. But the fact of the matter is that the fact that they've tracked down the descendants of those people shows just how intense this move of I don't know if I would call that critical race theory. It kind of smacks of it, though, because all actions like this are meant to give support to the critical race theory ideological movement in the country, right?
Yeah, it's another political interest group that ecclesiastical bureaucracies are moving toward placating, and this is just in harmony with what we were talking about, which is we have to have a sense of realism about the functional operations of day-to-day ecclesiastical activities without yielding to hysteria or naivete.
Yeah, or magisterial hyperpositivism. You don't want to do it because at that point you're getting really close to becoming a Mormon Catholic.
Yes.
Where basically where the Mormons think that if the prophet says so, it's directly from God. And the thing of it is that to me, it's kind of goofy because it's this is a caricature,
right,
of magisterial and papal authority.
It's a Protestant caricature.
And the thing too, I'll bring this up is but anyway, all this stuff in the stagnant state that people haven't been able to find this hermeneutic. This is what has brought me out of my chambers, to redo this again, to do this again. And I mean it's fun so far, so we'll keep doing it. But we're gonna briefly acknowledge the German bishops. Move on here for a second, and we won't spend too much time on that. But we will probably do a fuller show on that to talk about the situation in Catholic Europe in general and the German bishops, and basically, everyone here probably knows the story, which is that basically, why don't you can kind of narrate. The CDF did this note, right, against blessing of gay union or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's widely known now that the German bishops want to move ahead and formalize what was really happening all over the place already, which is the blessing of homosexual unions.
So this is distinct from a marriage. They're not.
Yes,
and this is important.
Distinct from yeah, this is distinct from marriage, because what they're doing is they're making use of theological qualifiers that we know pretty well by now, and have been used very often over the past like 70 years, which is the idea that that we can bless the union, uh, while that not necessarily being a full endorsement of everything that goes on, but we're gonna bless it because the union of people is good, I guess, you know.
And once
Um,
again, you don't want to be a theory cell.
yes, exactly.
Don't be stupid. It's like, well, they can do this. They told their intentions are not to affirm. They just want to bless these two people like, no, that's not what this is
As if
about.
like as if like uh, liturgical blessings can operate like a line item veto, where it's like that's good, that's good, that's not good, that's not good. You know, it doesn't work that way.
I'm gonna. It's like we need to just get like a rapist and just like shove him in front of a German bishop, like some like obviously like smelly schizo looking serial rapist, and be like, would you bless this man
Right.
and in his struggles? And the bishop
Well, you
is
know what you could do is you could just get a like a e-racist podcaster, like a white right wing podcaster, and ask them the same question. I wonder what they'll say.
would you bless this Volkish union?
Right. Um, so yeah. Well, anyway. So in response to that, the CDF comes out with this actually pretty good statement. I was surprised by how straightforward it was. I mean, it was a little soft in some areas, but you know, well, what are you going to do? Um, and it did just reiterate the Catholic teaching on this, that no, these unions are intrinsically evil. They are wrong from their nature. They cannot. Grace perfects nature, so that there's under no circumstance in which the union as a union can be blessed. This is just common sense. This is obvious theology that we've had for 2,000 years. Not a good idea. You can't do it. And now it's kind of a stalemate, I guess. It's sort of the standoff. I, I think that this fits in pretty well with what we were talking about earlier, with what Pope Francis really wants to dedicate his papacy to, which is NGO activism, things like that. So I'm not sure if he really wants to get too much involved in this kind of thing. It kind of calls him back into, you know, actually doing his job, being a pope. Uh, Not sure he really wants to do that. So
Yeah, I'm sure that once he got word of it, he's like, I just wanted to take a pictures with Chelsea Clinton. She's
right, I mean,
she's a nice lady. She says that I'm very wise. George Clooney was supposed to Skype me.
right.
Now I've got to reschedule that. Damn it. Yeah, well, I mean, it got so bad that it culminated right in the German bishops, not the German bishops, but something like 50 to 100 parishes. And here's the thing: these are all your lib parishes, right? Like there were dioceses, there were like from what I understand, there were entire deaneries, which is the smaller unit of ecclesiastical territory underneath the diocese. You got parishes. Parishes make up deaneries. Deaneries become a diocese. There you go. That did not have these going on at all. But you know, in the cities and these wacko parishes, and there was a progressive Catholic organization called Maria 2.0, which really was the moving force and organized these things. And the thing is it's kind of, I was kind of disappointed because it wasn't very well organized. If you actually like read the news, you read the papers, it wasn't organized. Like some of them did basically just like, do we just ask people who are gay to raise their hand and like ask them to hold the hand of their partner and bless them?
I mean, that kind of thing happens. Like even yeah, I can visualize that pretty well, because in regular parishes, like they do things like that for like even just married couples, like you know, straight married couples.
Where you go, do they ever do a pet blessing on St. Francis of Assisi's Day?
Yeah, things like that. I mean, that stuff is very, very common. So they probably just took that kind of form and applied it to this evil situation.
I really want someone on like the pet blessing day to just like bring like a goat and and just be like, "This is my goat. He's not producing the milk. I think he's got the demons.
Yeah.
Need a blessing from the padre." But stuff that actually happens, that should happen, that's actually but yeah, and so they did this. It was very disorganized, and like some of them had like a full blown like political event and statement with like PowerPoint slides and shit. Others were just like, okay, whoever here is homosexual and your partner, raise your hand, and I will bless you in particular. My knees are bad. I cannot go down to bless you individually. And then others, they had like a line, and it's like it showed me, it's like there was no like organizing document telling them how to do their thing, which tells you that it was organized by progressive boomers and not professional like anything that like has Soros money. Oh dude, like organized, everyone knows what to do, everyone has a script, they have nice pamphlets and literature. But like Maria 2.0, it was just like, just bless the gay people and their lovers. That's the instructions. And so that was so brazen that the big leftist bishop, the main dissenter, Bishop Betzing, who is the president of the German Conference of Catholic Bishops, which I will take great pains to talk about. Any canon lawyers in the audience will know that these bishop conferences are not canonical entities at all. And so it's kind of bizarre that like the Vatican lets them exist. It's kind of
the only way they could be magisterial, as far as I understand, is if the Pope explicitly gives like his signature to it, or if there's like some decision that is like completely voted on, unanimous.
Yeah, it's like if you want to know what your bishop's actually doing, go to your diocese website. You don't have to pay attention to the USCCB if you don't want to. But anyway, Bishop Betzing was the head of the German Conference of Catholic Bishops. He basically was like, "Oh no, guys, I don't think that's a good idea to do this," because he was even saying, "This is a bridge too far and this isn't helpful. Would you please stop?" And he's someone who very clearly is like for women deacons, and he kind of gives signals that he is probably for the ordination of women. But this is the thing we're talking about, is that don't be a dumb theologian. If you are an academic or armchair theologian, you don't have to talk about the technicality of this. When we were on a different show with Radical Catholic a while ago, where he talked about like, oh well technically no, this is bullshit, and you can call it out for what it is, and that's fine, and you're not a bad person for doing so.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a net which just the sense of the faithful can come out and in a very simple way recognize this for what it is and reject it wholesale. You don't have to get into the theological weeds. Some people can do that, and that might be necessary to refute them adequately, but that's not your obligation.
So here's the passage in Genesis about, it's like, here's Romans, here's Corinthians, here's the passage from Genesis, there you go. Like you don't, but so we'll probably do more stuff about the German bishops because they're always up to something, and we just wanted to acknowledge that a little bit. But on the other side of the spectrum, I have been seeing a lot of talk about Father Altman.
Yes.
I think we'll wrap up with that, with the based priest, the priest of the people, the Trump of parish priests.
Yeah, he's really been making a headway. And so what kind of has given him much more attention now, as I suppose his bishop has sort of asked him to step down from his parish because, for those of you who don't know, he's sort of made a name for himself by speaking very plainly, very passionately, and very clearly about the uh, just manifest evil of cooperating with specifically, the Democratic Party, with you know
He's been
evils like
and
feminism, abortion,
he's been
homosexuality,
anti
things like
lockdown
that.
too, right? He's been anti
Yeah, he's
lockdown.
also been very, and I think that's part of what really has gotten him in trouble. He does name names. He does, and he accuses, bishops of abandoning their flock by cooperating with these draconian COVID measures.
So is it Alpha Ministries or something? Because
Yeah, that's his.
I'll do the
That's the
usual,
channel that.
the habit of the paste bin with the show notes that people can go through and kind of read the stuff that we're talking about. But the title, because the title of the videos, because you sent me some of these videos, it's like Father Altman says, "God damns feminism and
Yeah.
communism."
Yeah,
Based.
some of it's a little boomery, gets into socialism and communism. He's very upset about these things, but
Father Altman,
he
you cannot be Catholic and a Democrat. Period. Part 1. And like he calls out, well, yeah, it is very, boomer concern, but like this kind of talks about something that we've talked about, you and I, about how since the presidential election of 2020, the popular consciousness of just how bad this stuff is has really exploded. And so you have people who were like Daily Wire listeners, people that, have, for one thing, among like, older conservative, like that generation of like boomers and some Xers, Bannon's podcast has just like kind of exploded. In terms of people talking about it. But you have people talking about critical race theory now very
just
actively.
calling it anti-white racism too.
Yeah. And so that's really, really interesting. And so he's kind of a part of that. And let me see here. So I have the Catholic News Agency article by Matt Hadrow, who, by the way, used to be a press secretary for the New Jersey Congressman Chris Smith. Just saying that for no reason, no reason at all. That this article is so passive aggressive, because it talks about Father Altman. Give me one moment. Let me find this. He said the 360,000 scare quotes white men died fighting in the Union Army during the Civil War in an effort to end slavery, while not citing that nearly 40,000 black Union soldiers died during the war. And according,
that's such journalist speak.
It really is. According to the Wisconsin Examiner, Father Altman appeared on the podcast U.S. Grace Force in January, where he referred to the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol as a false flag. In the podcast, he appeared to blame the killing of Breonna Taylor on her hanging around a bad crowd. And
totally unfounded, by the way, just totally unfounded.
But if you hang around people who do criminal activity, you're probably going to get into an violent altercation and die, possibly with the police. Being on the air and reading through this, it has an air of like Jared Holt to it.
No, yeah, it does. It reads exactly like how journalists write like hit piece articles, Right Wing Watch, SPLC, ADL. It reads precisely that same way. That is the nature of this article.
And it's like there is no like neutral diction here. There is no,
No.
neutral journalist. It's like in an interview with Cream City Catholic posted online April 6th, 2021, under the title Goddamns Communism and Feminism, Father Altman used offensive feminine stereotypes to explain why women cannot be ordained priests. Quote unquote, Father Altman. Women can't preach because we need the truth when listening to what matters for eternal salvation. We don't need you to say, does my dress make me look fat? As the joke goes, he said. He went on to criticize the ambiguity of women preaching. It's like they, women, expect you to read their minds.
And that's tame compared to what you read from like church fathers, by the way, as all of you know. Like what Saint Jerome has said about women. Really, do we want to go there?
I'm sure that there's some. There's probably some. Vole, like the rodent, some vole like theological grad student that will correct you on that if it pleases them, and about how the church fathers aren't actually saying what they're clearly saying, and but yeah, so what's a big deal is that his GoFundMe has like reached over 200,000. So Father Altman is pursuing canonical recourse. He is challenging the bishop's decision. He's getting a canon lawyer, and the church is a society. There is money that you have to pay to go through the legal process and all that stuff. And so he's like raised over $200,000.
That's crazy.
And so like we were talking the other day is like So it's from Give, Send, Go, which is not GoFundMe. It's one of these independent,
He's smart enough not to use GoFundMe.
Yeah, so it shows that he's aware. They asked for $20,000, and they have met their goal over, and they have 100% funded their goal. To the point that is 1,467% funded. They have raised 293,000.
So nearly 300,000.
Yes, almost 300K. $293,440. And so they have had 3,335 donors give money. And you can see the little thing, and so this is interesting. Some nice lady just posted 3 minutes ago. Father has been a blessing to me. His homilies have been inspired and very, caps lock, effective. He is saying exactly what a shepherd should be saying to his flock, the, caps lock, truth. And
he really has emerged as like a Catholic folk hero.
Yeah.
To faithful Catholic families that are just desperate for some kind of leadership that is coming from legitimate ecclesiastical power. We have dozens of like lay people who are in various positions of, for lack of a better word, leadership, right?
Oh God!
But what we are severely lacking in are clerics that are in communion with the church, in communion with Rome, yet who are actually functioning as shepherds and leaders, and he's fulfilling a need. He really is, and I think that has to be recognized.
I'll clap back at you just an itty bitty bit, which is that. Well, you corrected yourself. Father Altman is a legitimate authority in the church. He's an ordained priest, and you said to me the other day that there was some theological quibbling, which is worth pointing out on the air here.
Yeah, I mean, he says some things that are just not quite theologically precise, or sometimes flat out wrong. Like I'll just give it sort of an example. Like he said that Papal infallibility has only been exercised like 3 or 4 times. I mean, it's actually a lot more than that. And that everything else is an opinion, which really is not true. I mean, there's the ordinary magisterium, there's the authentic magisterium. I think that has to be recognized. But I think he can learn those things. He can refine himself, and he's going to have a lot of time to do that. Because
Yeah,
he's going to be sort of out of a pastoral commission for a while, probably.
yeah,
But we have to. We can't be like as traditional Catholic lay people. We have to recognize heroic virtue when we see it, and um, I think we should recognize them as a very good development, and we should support them.
yeah. It reminds me very much of as in persona of like this whole thing has as a folk hero, as and the term like I've used before is like a folk shaman, and what I mean by that is it's like all of
Yes.
the psychic energy, and I mean that in like the psychological sense. Don't think that I'm like being a weird occultist. Okay, calm
Right.
down, because I know that there's people that probably listen to this that all they do is stay in their rooms all day and hunt heretics in their closet.
Like anti Charles Cologne people.
Yeah, we'll talk about that another day.
Yeah.
That's sure. I will see if I will finally fulfill my promise and get Charles here to defend himself and to just have a good old time. But the the thing is like all of the psychic anguish of like the MAGA Catholic milieu and faction, which is pretty large. Basically
It is. It's a very large constituency, and it is prominent.
but all of that anguish and frustration that has been fermenting since McCarrick, since Francis doing anything, since the 2020 election. All of that has kind of like siphoned into one man who just like exemplifies the conservative Catholic Trump supporting frustration, and it's just all there in Father Altman. And so he
And
really,
that way, he is Trumpian.
yeah. And it reminds me, his style reminds me of that, where it's like it's kind of rough around the edges, but like really
Yes.
earnest and from the heart. And of course he's hated by all of these lizards on Twitter, about like I'm so disturbed by how many Christians worship Father Altman and not Christ. And it's like, shut up. Like
Right, because a lot of
mm-hmm.
yeah, like a lot of sermons that I listen to, I get the same vibes from Trump in 2016 and 2015. I should correct myself. When
Yeah.
he announced, he was saying like they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some I assume are good people. That line, it was rough around the edges, and and Trump himself wasn't necessarily able to articulate his own like America First agenda in the most the most precise
An
and the
elegant
most
way.
precise and articulate way. Like he wasn't necessarily able to do that. Nevertheless, he was very effective. He instinctually got it. He was directionally sound, uh, and he had the wherewithal uh, uh, to at least temporarily get his movement to the promised land. Right. And I feel this. I'm getting the same vibes from Father Altman.
Yeah, and so I think that the the thing here is that he is, and this is the thing is that people like it when you're like a priest of the people for the Brown Church or something like that. And that's not
Yes.
me being derisive. There's literally books titled that, called Brown Church, and advocating for like third world Catholicism and all of this stuff, and the merits of that can be argued another time. But Father Altman is, with all of the foibles that means, and I think all of the good stuff that means, he is a priest of the people in a very real sense. And that makes certain people very angry. And I'm again, we keep saying this, but he's obviously not perfect or anything, but it's a very big deal that he's stuck his neck out like this, and it's like, oh, he's being disobedient to his bishop. He's seeking canonical representation.
He actually praises his bishop to this day. He actually says that, you know, I like Bishop Callahan. I think that he's directionally doing the right things, and I think he's just getting a lot of pressure. So he does not have a disobedient disposition. He does not have that.
Yeah, I think that if we can swing it, I might see if there's a way to get in touch with him and see if we could have a conversation with him. Maybe, if that's at all possible. But no, you know, so definitely that's very interesting, a very interesting development there. But, you know, I'm very glad that we managed to have this conversation, and I'm glad that we're back, because this was fun. I forgot how fun this was.
Yeah.
Because it's like you can have this it's so weird when you talk with, like, the recording button on, how it just, something in the air changes. Like, it's different. But I will shill really quickly that we do have an email address. And if you would like to send us an email that we may read on the air, whether it be a dedicated mailbag episode, which we are planning to institute forthwith, time permitting, that email address is In Taberna @protonmail.com. INTABERNA @protonmail.com. And you can send us your schizophrenic ramblings, your pent-up rage, your compliments, your deepest secrets. Say it again.
Questions.
Yeah, questions, comments, concerns. Questions especially. We are not your dad or your spiritual director, but we'd be more than happy to answer any topical questions.
Scrupulous moral theology conundrums excluded.
Yes. Go see a shrink. You need help. Just go see a shrink. It's okay. There's probably fine Catholic psychiatrists somewhere in the area. It is worth driving 2 hours to get psychological help if you need it. But with that, thank you everybody for joining us in Taberna, and thanks for my co-host for being here today, as you will many other days to come, I hope. And we're going to do this again soon. We're not going to make any promises to schedules or anything. It's just you'll recognize the schedule when you see it. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see you later in Taberna.
Da pro papa, qua pro rege, bibunton ne sine lege.